was a cool autumn evening when I first started noticing the small changes. I had always prided myself on the life I built with Claire. Our marriage felt like a fortress, a sturdy structure built on trust, love, and shared dreams. At 30, I worked as a data analyst in a fast-paced tech company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me a sense of purpose. Claire, on the other hand, was a marketing manager at a creative agency. She was always busy, meetings, presentations, client dinners, but we made it work. We had our routines. We knew how to carve out time for each other despite our demanding careers. I could still remember the first time I met Claire. We met through an online dating app 4 years ago. She had this infectious laugh, and she was genuinely kind in a way I hadn't experienced before. The first few months of dating were perfect, and after 2 years I felt like I had found my person. We got married, and for a while I believed our life together was everything I had ever wanted. I worked from home 3 days a week and she had a flexible schedule. Our evenings were always ours, spent lounging on the couch, watching our favorite TV shows, making spontaneous dinner plans and dreaming about the future. Life was easy, or so I thought. But in March, everything started to feel different. It was subtle at first. Claire came home later and later with explanations that, on the surface, seemed entirely reasonable. A late meeting with a client, an unexpected dinner with colleagues, an extra session at the gym. At first, I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. Trust was everything in our marriage, right? One evening, she walked in around 9:30 p.m., her hair soaking wet, dripping onto the hardwood floor. She tossed her bag onto the couch and said, "Had a tough workout today." I was sweating so much I had to wash my hair right there. I didn't say anything immediately. It was just one of those things you don't question in the moment, I guess. But something inside me started to stir. Claire always showered at home. She hated the gym showers, always saying they were too uncomfortable. Plus, her hair never looked that wet after a workout. It was like a red flag that I couldn't ignore no matter how hard I tried. But I pushed the feeling down. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. After all, she had a reason for everything, didn't she? The days that followed only added to my unease. Claire would leave the house in one outfit, only to come home in something entirely different. One Thursday she left for work in dark jeans and a white blouse, but when she came back she was wearing black leggings and a pink t-shirt. I asked her what happened and she casually said, "Spilled coffee on myself at lunch. Had to buy new clothes." It seemed harmless enough, but my mind wouldn't let it go. I checked the credit card statement later that night. No new purchases for clothes that day. My stomach tightened. It was a small thing, but it didn't add up. Maybe she paid in cash. Maybe she just hadn't remembered it was an old outfit. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then came the scent. Claire had worn the same floral perfume since we met. I knew it by heart. But one Friday night, when she leaned in to kiss me, I caught something different. A masculine, woody cologne mixed with the familiar scent of her hair. I froze. I could feel my heart start to race, but I forced myself to keep calm. "New shampoo?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though my voice cracked slightly. She blinked too fast, a slight twitch of panic in her eyes before she said, "Yeah, I switched brands. Don't you like it?" I nodded, though I didn't like it. Something in my gut told me to dig deeper, but I didn't. I didn't want to be the guy who accused his wife without evidence. I wanted to believe the best in her. But as the days went on, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. And that was when I decided I needed answers. I didn't want to confront Claire based on suspicion alone, though. I wouldn't destroy our marriage without proof. But I also couldn't pretend like everything was fine. I Googled private investigator, and that was the beginning of the end. I found a discreet agency not far from where we lived, in a nondescript commercial building with worn carpets and beige walls. The detective who greeted me was in his 50s, and his demeanor was calm, almost too calm for what I was about to ask him to do. 2 weeks. That's how long it would take for him to follow Claire, document everything, and provide me with a full report. Photos, videos, times, locations, everything I needed to know. The cost was steep, but at that point I didn't care. I needed to know the truth. I couldn't keep living with the uncertainty eating away at me. I signed the contract. My hands were shaking when I paid the upfront fee, but I had made my decision. I would find out the truth, and when I did, I'd deal with it. One way or another, the truth would come out. The next 2 weeks were agony. Every day I went through the motions: work, dinner with Claire, watching TV together, pretending that everything was fine. But inside I was slowly unraveling. Every time she picked up her phone and smiled at the screen, my heart would sink. Every time she said, "I'm going to the gym," I would picture her not at the gym but somewhere else with someone else. I was suffocating in my own thoughts, the weight of the unknown pressing down harder with each passing day. The hardest part was pretending. Pretending I wasn't watching her every move. Pretending I didn't see the little lies, the inconsistencies, the way she would avoid eye contact when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I could no longer look at her the same way. The love was still there, but it felt like something had shifted. It was like the foundation we had built was cracked, and I could see the fractures, even if she couldn't. I would sit in our living room at night, staring at the blank screen of the TV, my mind racing. My thoughts kept circling back to the moment she came home with her wet hair, and I couldn't shake the image of her eyes as she tried to explain. Something wasn't adding up, and I was terrified that what I suspected was true. Then on the 14th day the call came. "Ethan, I've got everything." Ron's voice was calm on the other end of the line. "You can come pick it up whenever you're ready." I was numb. I hung up the phone and drove to the investigator's office as quickly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't think I've ever been so afraid and so relieved at the same time. Part of me wanted to know the truth, needed to know, but another part of me was scared of what I would find. What if I was wrong? What if all this had just been in my head? When I arrived, Ron handed me a thick folder and a small flash drive. I could feel the weight of it in my hands. It was like holding the key to everything I needed to know, and at the same time, the thing that would destroy everything if I opened it. I paid for the investigation with my quarterly bonus, the money feeling like nothing more than paper now. What did money matter when your entire world was hanging in the balance? "Take your time," Ron said. "I've documented everything. If there's something you need, you just let me know." I nodded, though I didn't trust my voice. I walked out of the office, clutching the folder tightly to my chest, my mind already racing with thoughts of what might be inside. The drive home felt longer than it was. I couldn't stop shaking, my fingers gripping the steering wheel as I tried to steady my breathing. I wanted to go inside, sit down, and just watch the footage, but I didn't know if I was ready for what it might reveal. I knew, though, that I couldn't keep putting it off. The truth had to come out, whether I was ready or not. When I walked through the door, Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, sipping a cup of coffee. She smiled when she saw me, and I gave her a small, tight smile in return. "Long day?" she asked, her voice light, casual. "Yeah, you could say that," I replied, my voice betraying none of the storm brewing inside of me. I set the folder and flash drive on the table between us. Claire looked up at me, surprised by the sudden shift in my demeanor. "What's this?" she asked, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. "Proof," I said flatly. I couldn't look at her, not yet. "Proof of everything." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The emotions were rushing in now, anger, sadness, disbelief, but they were all overshadowed by the cold, quiet resolve that had settled over me. This wasn't about getting answers anymore. It was about ending the lie. I sat down across from her, pushing the folder closer. "We need to talk, Claire. This isn't something we can ignore anymore." She glanced at the folder, then back at me. Her face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean? What's going on, Ethan?" I didn't answer her. I just pressed the button on the flash drive, plugged it into the TV, and let the footage begin. The first image that appeared on the screen was a shot of Claire leaving the house, her familiar black purse slung over her shoulder. She smiled to herself, and I could hear her phone buzzing in her bag. The timestamp showed she was leaving for the gym. But then the video jumped. The next scene showed Claire driving down a highway, not toward the gym, but toward a small motel off the side of town. She parked in the lot, glancing around before she stepped out of the car. I could feel Claire stiffen beside me. She turned to look at me, her face pale. "What is this?" she asked, her voice suddenly trembling. "Ethan, what is this?" I didn't answer. I just pointed to the screen. The video continued. Claire entered the motel, and not 10 minutes later, Jason, the personal trainer from the gym, appeared. He walked toward the door, and they greeted each other with a hug. The camera followed them inside, capturing every detail of their interaction. For the next 2 hours, the video showed them together, laughing, talking, and at one point they kissed in the parking lot before going back inside. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. The truth was there, staring both of us in the face, and all the explanations in the world wouldn't change what was unfolding on the screen. By the time the video ended, Claire was crying. Her face was streaked with mascara, her hands trembling as she wiped her tears away. "Ethan, I can explain," she whispered, her voice shaking. But I didn't want to hear her explanations anymore. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken, begging for answers. I had known the truth all along. Now it was her turn to face it. "Keep watching," I said quietly. "It's not over yet." The second part of the video began. The second part of the video was almost worse than the first. It was one thing to see Claire with Jason once, but the footage that followed confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It wasn't just a slip-up. It was a pattern. Claire and Jason had been meeting in that same rundown motel multiple times a week, always arriving in separate cars, always staying for 2 hours, and always leaving without a word to anyone else. There were days when they looked so carefree, laughing together in the parking lot, almost like they were sharing a private joke, a world that I wasn't a part of. And with every passing scene, the anger inside me grew. How could she do this? How could she lie to me, to our entire marriage, and pretend everything was fine? But there was one more twist. As the footage played, I saw Claire leaving the motel again, hair slightly disheveled, as she walked toward her car, smiling at Jason. They exchanged a few last words before Claire got into her car and drove away. The timestamp showed that she was on her way home, just like all the other nights she had come home to me, pretending nothing had changed. Pretending that she hadn't just been with another man. I felt a pang in my chest as the last part of the video began. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was the complete destruction of everything I had believed in. My heart clenched, but I kept my composure. I wasn't going to break. Not here. Not now. Then came the moment I had planned for, when the screen split in half. The footage on one side continued, showing Claire leaving the motel, walking toward her car, just as she had done so many times. But on the other side of the screen, something unexpected appeared. A live video call from Jennifer, Jason's wife. Jennifer's face appeared, her eyes red from crying. I could see her gripping her phone with trembling hands, her lips pressed tight in pain. Her presence on the screen was a stark contrast to the light-hearted scenes of Claire and Jason. It was raw. It was real. Claire froze as soon as she saw Jennifer's face. She went pale, her mouth opening and closing without any sound. I could feel the tension in the room, the air growing thicker with every second that passed. Jennifer spoke first. Her voice was sharp and I could hear the hurt beneath the anger. "Hi, Claire," she said, her words deliberate and biting. "I guess we have a lot in common now, don't we?" I looked at Claire, her face crumpling as she realized what was happening. The room was silent for a moment, save for the soft hum of the projector. Claire's eyes darted between Jennifer on the screen and me, her body trembling. "You," Claire started, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." I raised my hand, cutting her off. "You didn't want me to find out at all, Claire. You wanted to keep lying to me, to keep coming home, pretending everything was fine." My voice was steady, but it felt like my chest was about to cave in. "How many times did you look me in the eye and lie to me? How many times did you think I wouldn't notice?" Claire didn't respond. She just sat there, her hands shaking uncontrollably in her lap. Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her anymore. I wasn't going to let her see me crumble. This was the moment she needed to face the consequences of her actions. Jennifer, still on the video call, spoke again, her voice dripping with cold fury. "I know about all the times you two met at that motel. I know everything, Claire." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Colin might be your lover, but he's my husband. And now everyone's going to know who he really is." Claire gasped, looking at me in desperation. "Please, Ethan. Please don't do this. I know I've made a huge mistake. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Her voice cracked and she reached for my arm, but I pulled away before she could touch me. "I don't want your apologies, Claire," I said, my voice firm. "You've hurt me in ways I can't even describe. I don't want anything from you anymore." Jennifer, still watching the screen, nodded. "I'm going to send this video to Colin's boss and his parents. Everyone's going to know what he's been up to. No one gets away with this." The weight of it all was crushing. I had planned this moment, made sure every detail was in place, but now that it was happening, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. It was cold, almost clinical, but I didn't care. What mattered was that Claire had to see the destruction she had caused, not just to our marriage, but to the trust we had once shared. The video ended, and for a moment, all I could hear was the soft hum of the projector. Claire was sobbing now, her body shaking as she clutched her chest, trying to catch her breath. "Please, Ethan. I know I made a mistake. I know it's too late, but we can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can try to make this work. Please." I stood up slowly, my heart racing, and I grabbed the backpack I had prepared earlier. I threw it onto her lap. "Your things. I want you out of this house tonight." Claire looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "No, Ethan, please. Don't do this. I still love you." I didn't respond. I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I walked toward the door, my hand on the handle, ready to leave. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Divorce papers will be filed tomorrow. And don't even think about trying to twist the story or hurt me. Everything is documented. If you try anything, it's going straight to court. I turned around to see Claire, her body hunched over, trembling in defeat. Her life was falling apart, and in a way I felt nothing. I wasn't angry or relieved. I was just done. Before I left, I said one last thing. Just to be clear, the house is in my name. You have no rights here. You'll be out tonight, and you can pick up the rest of your things later in the week with a scheduled time. But don't even think about contesting anything. It's over. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need to. As I left, I could hear her sobbing behind me, but I didn't look back. It was time to move on. It was time to rebuild. The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence that filled the house was deafening. It felt as if the entire world had fallen away, leaving nothing but emptiness. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the doorknob, listening to the soft echo of Claire's sobs from the other side of the room. I could hear her pleading, begging, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and walked down the hallway toward the front door. The house that had once been our home felt cold now. It was no longer a place of comfort, but a reminder of everything I had lost. Every picture on the wall, every little memento we had shared, seemed like a lie now. The life I thought I was building with Claire was shattered, reduced to nothing more than broken memories and betrayal. When I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a wave. It was sharp and fresh, but it did little to shake the heaviness that had settled inside of me. I felt numb, like I was walking through a dream that I couldn't wake up from. The world around me seemed distant, disconnected, as if I were observing it from afar. I didn't know where to go next, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house. Not tonight. So I drove. For hours, I drove through the city, past the places we had gone to together, past the spots that held our memories. It was like everything around me was taunting me, reminding me of what was lost, of what I had believed in. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that the person I thought I knew, the person I had trusted with everything, was a stranger to me now. I couldn't fathom how someone could pretend so convincingly, how Claire had smiled at me, held my hand, told me she loved me, all the while living a double life. I couldn't even bring myself to feel angry at her anymore. Anger was a luxury I didn't have. There was too much to process, too much to come to terms with. Instead, I felt this strange numbness. A calmness that was almost frightening. It was as if I had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now that it had arrived, there was nothing left to feel. The next few days passed in a blur. I stayed with a friend for a while, not wanting to be in the same place where Claire and I had shared our life. I didn't want to hear her voice, didn't want to face the emptiness of the house. It was easier to just keep moving, to avoid confronting the pain. But as the days went on, I couldn't ignore the reality of what was happening. Claire was gone. The life I thought we had built was gone. She had left, and all that was left in her wake was a hole in my chest. The first night in my friend's apartment was the hardest. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. The divorce papers were already being prepared, and there was no turning back now. There was nothing left to hold on to. When I finally returned home to grab the rest of my things, the house felt different. It felt final. Claire's things were still there, scattered around the living room as if she had just stepped out for a moment. But I knew she wasn't coming back. She had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I moved quickly, packing up the things I needed, not bothering with the rest. The house felt cold, the air stale. Every corner I turned, I saw reminders of the life we had shared. The little details that once meant everything now felt like they belonged to someone else. I left a note for the landlord, letting him know that I would be moving out soon. I had no desire to stay there any longer. It wasn't just the memories of Claire, it was the reminder that I had been foolish, that I had trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I had been living in a fantasy, and now I was forced to confront the reality of what was left. The hardest part, though, was knowing that I had given everything to someone who had taken it all and thrown it away. There would be no closure. No neat resolution. This was the kind of wound that didn't heal quickly. It would take time, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But I was ready to face it. I had to be. The day after I moved out, I got a message from Jennifer. She had sent me an update, letting me know that Colin had been fired from the gym. His boss had seen the evidence, and company policy didn't allow relationships between trainers and clients. The fallout had been swift. I felt a small sense of satisfaction hearing that. At least Colin was facing consequences for his actions. As for Claire, I didn't know what had happened to her. I didn't want to know. She had made her choices, and now she would live with them. I spent the next few weeks focusing on myself, doing everything I could to move forward. I threw myself into work, into rebuilding what was left of my life. I didn't talk to Claire or anyone who was connected to her. I wanted nothing to do with that world anymore. Time passed. The pain slowly faded, replaced by something else. Not relief, not happiness, just a sense of quiet. I had learned that trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. That lesson would stay with me forever. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop near my new apartment when I saw her. Claire. She looked different. Smaller. Faded. Her once vibrant hair was now short and lacked the shine it used to have. She was walking down the street, alone, carrying grocery bags, head down as if she were trying to avoid the world. For a brief moment our eyes met. There was a flash of recognition in her gaze, and I saw the hesitation in her step. She seemed to want to cross the street, to come over and say something. But I didn't move. I didn't want to. I had nothing left to say to her. I grabbed my coffee and stood up, walking out the back door of the cafe. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life was over. I had closed it, and now it was time to keep moving forward. The silence in my new apartment felt different. It wasn't the emptiness that had consumed me before. It was peaceful. I had learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was living well, moving on, and building something better for myself. And as I sat there, finally allowing myself to relax, I realized something. I didn't need Claire to be happy. I didn't need her approval. I was enough. The future was wide open, and I was ready to embrace it. Months had passed since that day, that painful, defining moment when everything changed. I had started to find peace in the small things. A quiet morning with a cup of coffee, working through the day without the constant ache of betrayal gnawing at me, and slowly, cautiously rebuilding my life. The divorce had gone through without a hitch. Claire didn't contest anything. She had moved away, started over somewhere else, and I had no intention of ever hearing from her again. But as I stood in my new apartment, looking out the window at the bustling city streets below, I realized how far I had come. I had once believed that love was everything, that trust was the foundation of any relationship. But now I knew the truth. Trust, once shattered, could never truly be rebuilt. I couldn't change the past, and I didn't want to. What mattered now was the future. What mattered now was what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I had taken a step back from everything. I had kept to myself, focused on my work, and filled my days with the kind of routine that grounded me. But a part of me knew I couldn't stay locked away forever. The past had taught me a harsh lesson, but it had also given me clarity. I needed to move forward. I needed to take risks again, trust again, but with the wisdom I had earned. I wasn't the same person I was before. It was on a random Tuesday, several months after everything had settled, that I decided to take a chance. I signed up for a photography class. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was something I had always wanted to do but never made the time for. I had spent years living for someone else, catering to someone else's needs, and now it was time to do something just for me. I needed to rediscover my passion for life, the things that made me feel whole. The class was small, just a handful of people. I was nervous, unsure if I'd still have the patience to learn something new. But as the instructor, an older woman with a calm presence, started speaking about the basics of composition and light, I felt something inside me stir. It had been a long time since I felt that spark of excitement, and suddenly, it was there, flickering, fragile but real. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the class. Photography became my escape, my way to re-engage with the world, to see beauty in places I hadn't noticed before. I found peace in the lens, capturing moments, freezing time, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The weight of the past didn't feel so heavy anymore. One evening, while I was out walking around the city with my camera, I met someone new. Her name was Olivia. She was sitting at a cafe on the corner, a book in her lap, her eyes scanning the pages as the sun began to set. There was something about the way she carried herself, so calm, so focused on the world around her. It was different from what I was used to, and it intrigued me. I didn't approach her immediately. I didn't want to be intrusive. But after a few minutes, I found myself walking past her table, my camera hanging loosely from my neck. She looked up, catching my eye, and smiled. It was a simple smile, but there was something warm and genuine about it. "Nice camera," she said, nodding toward the lens. "Are you a photographer?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. I wasn't a professional. I wasn't even close. But the words came out before I could stop them. "Just starting out," I said. "Trying to learn, I guess." Olivia's smile widened. "That's great. I always think people who can see the world through a camera have a special gift. It's like they capture moments that others miss." There was something in her words, a kindness that resonated with me. And in that moment something inside me shifted. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I realized that I was ready. I was ready to open up again, ready to let someone else in, to take a risk. We talked for a while, sharing stories of life, books, art, and the kind of small things that felt meaningful. Olivia wasn't perfect. She had her own complexities, her own struggles, but there was something about her that made me feel like I could trust again. She wasn't trying to fix me or heal me or be something I needed her to be. She just was. And that was enough. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee, took long walks through the city, and shared moments of quiet understanding. Olivia didn't know the full story of what had happened with Claire, but she didn't need to. She respected my space, my need to keep parts of my past private. But with every conversation I felt more and more like myself again. I wasn't just a man who had been betrayed, I was a man who was learning to live again, who was learning that trust, when given to the right person, could be a beautiful thing. It wasn't easy. Nothing ever is. But little by little, I started to see a future that didn't include Claire, that didn't center around the pain of the past. It was a future filled with possibilities, with choices that were mine to make. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could move forward without looking back. Olivia and I had our first official date one rainy evening, the kind where the city lights reflect off the wet pavement, creating a glow that makes everything feel new. We went to a small restaurant I had been meaning to try, a quiet place that felt intimate. We talked about everything and nothing, our hopes, our fears, the things we loved and hated. There was no rush, no expectations. Just two people finding their way through the messiness of life together. That night, as I walked her home, I realized something. I wasn't just moving on from Claire. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was taking chances, trusting again, and finding joy in the things I had once taken for granted. It wasn't perfect. Life never is. But it was mine. And that was enough. In the end, I had learned that the best way to heal wasn't through revenge or resentment. It was through moving forward, embracing new experiences, and finding the strength to trust again, even after everything that had happened. Because sometimes, the only way out of the darkness is to walk into the light. And as I stood there with Olivia, under the glow of the city lights, I knew that I was finally ready to see what the future held. No more looking back. Only moving forward. The weeks with Olivia were a whirlwind, though it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We spent our days exploring the city, sharing little moments of wonder that I had almost forgotten how to appreciate. The spark in my chest, the kind of excitement I thought had been extinguished for good, slowly began to flicker back to life. I had spent so long living in the shadows of my past, haunted by the mistakes and betrayals that I'd allowed to define me, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply enjoy life again. Olivia was different from Claire, and in many ways, that was exactly what I needed. She didn't try to erase the past, but she didn't dwell on it either. With her, I felt no pressure to explain myself, to justify my choices. She listened when I spoke about the pain I'd gone through, but she didn't let it consume our conversations. Instead, she encouraged me to look ahead, to imagine the possibilities, and most importantly, to rediscover parts of myself that I had abandoned during my years with Claire. One Sunday afternoon, Olivia and I decided to visit a nearby art museum. We wandered through the exhibits, pausing to admire paintings and sculptures, discussing their meanings, and laughing at how certain pieces seemed so abstract that they barely made sense. It was the kind of day that felt timeless, like we were simply two people enjoying the world together without any rush or expectations. At one point, I found myself standing in front of a large abstract painting, its colors swirling and blending together in chaotic harmony. I had always been a logical person, a numbers guy, and I had never been much of an artist. But there was something about the way the colors danced in front of me that stirred something deep inside. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, standing beside me. She had an uncanny ability to find beauty in the most unexpected places, and I loved how she looked at the world with such open eyes. I nodded, though I couldn't quite explain why. "I think I see something in it," I said, my voice a little unsure. "Like, it's all messy, but there's still something perfect about it." Olivia smiled, her eyes meeting mine. "Life's a lot like that, isn't it? Messy, unpredictable. But when you really look at it, there's beauty in the chaos." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had tried to make sense of everything, trying to find some logical explanation for the pain and betrayal I had experienced. But the truth was, life didn't always make sense. It wasn't always neat, and sometimes the mess was what made it meaningful. The imperfections, the mistakes, the lessons, they were all part of the bigger picture. I glanced over at her, a quiet sense of gratitude settling in my chest. I had learned so much in the months since I'd left Claire, about myself, about what I wanted from life, and about the kind of person I needed by my side. Olivia wasn't perfect, but she didn't need to be. She had helped me see that perfection was an illusion, and what mattered was finding peace in the imperfections. As the afternoon wore on, we decided to take a walk through the park. The weather was crisp, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. It felt like the world was slowing down just for us. We talked about our childhoods, our families, and the things that had shaped us into who we were. For the first time in a long time, I found myself truly opening up, sharing parts of my past that I had kept buried for so long. Olivia listened, never interrupting, never judging. She simply let me speak, and in doing so, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. As we walked, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I had started this journey thinking that the pain of my past would always haunt me. I had believed that the scars of betrayal and loss would define who I was. But here I was, walking beside someone who had shown me that healing wasn't just about forgetting, it was about growing, about accepting the messiness of life and moving forward with it. When we reached the end of the park, Olivia turned to me with a soft smile. "I'm glad we met, Ethan," she said, her voice sincere. "You're a good person, and I'm happy to be part of your journey." I stopped walking and turned to face her, my heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. I never thought I'd be able to say this, but I'm glad to. I didn't know what I was missing until I met you. She reached out and took my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We didn't need words to understand each other. The connection between us was clear, and as we stood there, hand in hand, the future didn't seem so daunting anymore. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but now I wasn't facing it alone. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I realized that I had finally found a new path. It wasn't one that I had expected, but it was one that felt right. I wasn't defined by the pain of my past, but rather by the strength I had gained from it. I was ready for whatever came next, because for the first time I believed that the best was yet to come. And with Olivia by my side, I knew I had the chance to build something new, something real, something lasting. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about embracing it, learning from it, and moving forward with the lessons it had taught me. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. It was strange, really, how quickly life could shift. One moment, I was adrift, struggling to piece together the wreckage of my marriage and my self-worth, and the next, I was here, standing at the edge of something new with Olivia by my side, feeling more alive than I had in years. It was almost as if the universe had been waiting for me to make the choice to move forward before it revealed the path that had been right in front of me all along. I had learned so much from my past, but I had also come to understand something vital. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes patience. And it takes a willingness to trust again, even when it feels like the last thing you should do. Olivia and I had spent the past few months getting to know each other better. We weren't rushing anything. There were no grand declarations of love, no promises for the future that felt too heavy to bear. Instead, we let things unfold naturally as they should. She had her own life, her own history, and I respected that. I didn't want to be the person who asked her to fix me. I didn't want her to carry the weight of my past mistakes. I had learned to carry my own burdens, and I wanted to offer her the same respect. One evening, as we sat together on her couch, sharing takeout and laughing about some silly thing that had happened earlier that day, I realized something I hadn't even fully acknowledged until that moment. I was ready to trust again. Not just in her, but in myself. I was ready to believe that I could build something real with someone who truly valued me, flaws and all. "Do you ever think about the past, Ethan?" Olivia asked softly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between us. Her voice was calm, but there was a trace of curiosity in it, like she wanted to understand me on a deeper level. I paused, thinking about how far I had come. I had spent so much time running from the past, trying to forget the pain that came with it. But now, I didn't need to run anymore. I had confronted it, and it no longer had the power to control me. "I think about it a lot," I said honestly, "but not in the way I used to. I used to carry it around like a weight, like it was something that defined me. But now, I don't let it control me. I don't want it to dictate my future. I'm learning to move forward, to let the past be what it was and not try to make sense of everything that doesn't make sense." Olivia smiled softly at that, her eyes warm with understanding. "That's really beautiful, Ethan. It's hard to let go of the things that hurt us. But I think you're right. You can't change it, but you can choose how it shapes you moving forward." Her words stuck with me long after that night. Olivia had a way of making things feel simple, even when they were anything but. She didn't judge me for the mistakes I had made or for the person I used to be. She didn't expect me to be perfect. She saw me for who I was now, the person I had fought so hard to become. Over time, our relationship grew stronger, built not on the fragile ideal of perfection but on mutual respect, patience, and understanding. There were moments when doubts crept in, moments when I wondered if I was truly capable of opening my heart again, of trusting someone fully. But each time I looked at Olivia, I was reminded of something important. Trust isn't just something you give, it's something you earn. And with her, I felt like I could learn how to trust again, not just in her but in myself. One day, after a quiet weekend spent hiking through the woods, Olivia and I sat by a lake, our feet dangling in the water as we watched the sunset. It was peaceful, the air cool and crisp, the world around us still. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice low, almost hesitant. "About everything. About us. And I just want you to know. I'm not going to rush this. Whatever happens between us, I want it to happen in its own time." Olivia turned to face me, her expression thoughtful. "Ethan, we're not rushing anything. I like what we have. I like us." I smiled at that, feeling the warmth of her words. I had been so afraid of moving too fast, of making the same mistakes I'd made before. But this time I wasn't rushing. This time I was embracing what came, letting the connection we had grow at its own pace. It felt right. "I like us too," I said quietly, my heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "I've learned a lot in the past year. But one thing I know for sure, is that I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever comes next as long as it's with someone who truly sees me, flaws and all." She smiled, her hand finding mine, her fingers lacing through mine with an ease that felt natural. "You don't have to be perfect, Ethan. I'm not either. But we're here right now and that's enough." The simplicity of that moment hit me like a wave. Here we were, just two people sitting by a lake sharing a moment of peace, of connection. And that was enough. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It wasn't about erasing the scars or pretending they didn't exist. It was about living with them, learning from them, and choosing to move forward anyway. It was about trusting again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I had spent so much of my life holding on to pain, to loss, to betrayal. But with Olivia, I realized something important. The past could never truly be erased, but it didn't need to define me anymore. I was ready to write my own story, one that was filled with new beginnings, with lessons learned and love earned. And as I sat there, hand in hand with someone who cared for me not despite my flaws, but because of them, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. As the days passed, life continued to shift in subtle ways. Olivia and I grew closer, more attuned to each other's rhythms, our conversations deepening as we shared more of ourselves. The weight of the past, once a constant companion, had begun to fade into the background, replaced by the lightness of what we were building together. But despite the peace I was starting to feel, there was a lingering thought in my mind, something I hadn't fully confronted yet. The truth about Claire, about everything that happened, still hung between us like a shadow. I knew it was only a matter of time before the past would have to be spoken aloud. And though I had been honest with Olivia about what happened, I hadn't told her everything. Not in detail, at least. I had shared the basics, the betrayal, the divorce, the broken trust, but I hadn't explained how deep the pain had run or how it had reshaped me. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping wine and watching the city lights flicker on below, Olivia turned to me, her expression more serious than I had seen it in a while. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," she said softly, her voice hesitant. I could feel my heart skip a beat, a moment of panic rising in my chest. I knew what was coming even before the words left her mouth. "Why haven't you told me everything about Claire?" she asked, her gaze steady but kind. "I mean, I know the broad strokes of it, but I feel like there's more. I don't want to pressure you, Ethan. But I can see that there's still something there, something you haven't shared." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't that I had intended to keep anything from her, but in some ways, it felt easier not to delve into the details. The pain of it all was still raw, and I didn't want to burden her with the weight of it. But Olivia wasn't asking for sympathy. She was asking for understanding. "I didn't want to talk about it," I said slowly, my voice quieter than usual. I think I've spent so long carrying that pain that I didn't want to bring it into us. I didn't want you to think I was still stuck in the past." Olivia nodded, her eyes softening. "I get that. But Ethan, you don't have to carry it alone. Not with me. I don't expect you to forget, or to magically be okay. But I need to know all of you. And I want to be there for you, through everything. Even the parts that are hard." Her words struck something deep inside me. For so long, I had carried my pain in silence, afraid that if I spoke it aloud, it would consume me. But sitting there with Olivia, I realized something important. True healing couldn't come from silence. It had to come from sharing, from being vulnerable, from letting someone in. I sat back in my chair, taking a long sip of wine, gathering my thoughts. I don't know if I can ever truly explain it, I began, my voice thick with emotion. When I found out about the affair, it shattered everything I believed in. Claire had always been my person. We built a life together, a future. And to discover that it was all a lie, that she was living a completely different life behind my back, it broke me. Not just because of what she did, but because I trusted her. I trusted her with everything. I gave her my love, my loyalty, my future. I paused, feeling the sting of the old wounds resurface, but I kept going. The hardest part wasn't just the betrayal, it was that she wasn't the person I thought she was. All those little things she said, the plans we made, they were all empty. I had invested so much of myself in someone who never truly saw me. It was like I was invisible. Olivia listened quietly, her hand resting on mine, offering silent support. The silence between us wasn't heavy or awkward, it was full of understanding. I've spent a long time trying to make sense of it, I continued, my voice breaking slightly. Wondering if I missed the signs, if I was too blind to see what was happening. And I think that's what hurt the most, feeling like I wasn't enough. Like I was the one who failed. But the truth is, it wasn't about me. It was about her choices. And for a long time, I couldn't separate that from my own sense of self-worth. I thought if she didn't love me enough to be loyal, maybe I wasn't lovable at all. There was a long pause as I let the weight of my words settle in the air. Olivia squeezed my hand, her touch grounding me. I can't imagine how painful that must have been, she said softly. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But Ethan, I need you to understand that it wasn't about you. It was about her. She made a choice to hurt you, but that doesn't define who you are. You are so much more than that pain, more than what she did. I met her gaze, feeling the truth of her words sink into my heart. The past would always be there, a part of me, a chapter in my story. But it didn't define who I was anymore. I wasn't the broken man who had been betrayed. I was someone who had learned to heal, to trust again, and to build something new. I know, I said quietly, my voice steady for the first time in a long while. I've been learning that. I didn't want to carry that hurt into something new. Into us. I want to be whole again. And with you, I feel like I can be. Olivia smiled, her eyes shining with a warmth that reached straight to my soul. You are whole, Ethan. And you don't have to carry that burden alone anymore. Not with me. There was a weight lifted off my shoulders, something I hadn't realized I had been holding on to until that moment. I didn't need to carry the scars of my past in secret. I didn't have to let them haunt me, shape me, or define me. The pain was part of my story, yes. But it was no longer the story I was living. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying the simple comfort of each other's company. The tension in my chest had eased, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. As I lay in bed later that night, I realized how far I had come. I had spent so long holding on to what I had lost, unable to move forward, unable to trust again. But now, with Olivia, I could see the future clearly, one that was full of possibilities, not limitations. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed. I was someone new, someone stronger. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that this time I wasn't alone. The days with Olivia passed in a quiet, comforting rhythm. There was something about her presence that made everything feel manageable, even when the world outside seemed to move too fast. Our relationship, though still in its early stages, had already grown deep roots. We had faced the past head-on, shared our vulnerabilities, and learned how to support each other without judgment. And yet, despite all the progress, there was still one thing left unspoken between us: the weight of forgiveness. It wasn't that Olivia had done anything wrong. In fact, she had been nothing but understanding, patient, and kind. But the truth was, I hadn't yet forgiven myself. The night of our conversation on the balcony, I had shared the painful details of my past with her, and in many ways that had been a catharsis. But the deeper wound, the one that still lingered, wasn't about what Claire had done to me, it was about how I had let that betrayal change me. I had allowed it to redefine my worth, to make me question everything I had believed about love, loyalty, and trust. I had forgiven Claire in my own way. I had let go of the bitterness and anger that once consumed me, understanding that her actions didn't define me. But forgiving myself, that was something I hadn't done yet. That thought sat in the back of my mind, quietly demanding attention. One evening, while Olivia and I were out for a walk through the park, the topic came up again, though not in the way I expected. We had just finished talking about an upcoming trip we were planning. Nothing big, just a weekend getaway, but as we strolled along the path, my thoughts drifted back to the conversation we had had months ago. Olivia, I began, my voice tentative, I don't think I've ever really forgiven myself for how everything turned out. I've moved on from Claire, and I've accepted that things happened the way they did. But sometimes I still find myself wondering if I could have done something differently. If I could have seen the signs sooner, or if I had been a better partner, maybe things wouldn't have fallen apart. Olivia stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression soft but serious. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, a knowing that went beyond words. "You're still carrying that, aren't you?" she said gently, her voice full of understanding. "You're holding yourself responsible for something that wasn't your fault." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. She was right, of course. I had spent so much time blaming myself for the collapse of my marriage that I had never really considered the fact that Claire's choices were hers alone to make. "I know," I whispered. "But it's hard not to wonder what I could have done differently. What if I had seen the warning signs? What if I could have prevented it? I wasn't perfect, Olivia. And sometimes I feel like I failed." She took a step closer to me, her eyes never leaving mine. "Ethan, you didn't fail. You were betrayed, and that's not something you can control. You gave everything you had to that relationship. You trusted her, you loved her. You did your best. But sometimes, no matter how hard we try, other people's choices are beyond our control." I felt the sting of her words, not because they were wrong but because they were true. The weight of guilt I had been carrying, the belief that I could have done something to save it, had been suffocating me. But hearing Olivia speak those words, hearing her remind me that I wasn't to blame, was like taking a deep breath after holding my breath for far too long. "Let me ask you something," Olivia said, her voice low but steady. "Would you hold someone else to the same standard? If a friend came to you with the same story, would you tell them they were to blame?" I paused, considering her question. No, of course not. I would never hold anyone else to that standard. I would never tell a friend that they were responsible for someone else's actions. "Then why do you do it to yourself?" she asked, a gentle but pointed question. "You're a good person, Ethan. You always have been. And this isn't about being perfect. It's about learning to forgive yourself just like you've forgiven others." Her words hit me harder than I expected. They pierced through the layers of self-doubt I had built up over the months. I had forgiven Claire. I had forgiven the world for its disappointments. But I hadn't forgiven myself. And as I stood there with Olivia, the truth was undeniable. I needed to let go. I needed to stop holding myself accountable for things that weren't mine to control. "I'm sorry, Olivia," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been carrying this for so long, thinking I had to fix it. But you're right. It's not my burden to carry anymore. I can't keep blaming myself." She smiled softly, her eyes kind and full of warmth. "That's all I've ever wanted you to see. You're not broken, Ethan. You're not damaged goods. You're a person who's been through something hard and you're still standing. And that's something to be proud of." For the first time in a long time, I felt a shift inside me, a release. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for so long had loosened, just enough for me to breathe a little easier. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't invincible. But I was learning. I was growing. And I was ready to let go of the guilt that had held me back. As we continued our walk through the park, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had come a long way since the days when I was consumed by pain and anger. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past, it was about accepting myself, flaws and all, and moving forward with the person I had become. Olivia had been my anchor, reminding me that I didn't have to carry the weight of my past alone. I didn't have to let it define me. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, and there would be challenges, no doubt. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had learned that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be me, and that was enough. The days following my conversation with Olivia were transformative. The weight that had once been so heavy on my shoulders now felt lighter, almost non-existent. I had let go of the guilt, the self-blame, and the constant questioning of what I could have done differently. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace with myself. It wasn't an instant transformation, of course. Healing never is. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I would catch myself wondering if I had truly moved on or if I was just hiding the hurt. But each day the fog lifted a little more. Each day I felt more confident in my ability to trust again, not just in others but in myself. Olivia and I spent the next few months enjoying the simplicity of our connection. We took short trips together. Weekends in the mountains, afternoons by the lake, quiet dinners at little-known restaurants in the city. Each moment with her was a gift and I treasured every one. There was no pressure. No rush. Just two people getting to know each other, sharing experiences and slowly weaving our lives together. But even as things between us deepened, I couldn't help but wonder, what about my future? What did it hold now that I had let go of the past and embraced the person I had become? It was during one of our trips to the mountains as we hiked through the woods that I realized something. It was a simple, almost trivial moment, but it changed everything. We had been walking for hours, chatting and laughing, when we stopped to catch our breath at a clearing overlooking a valley. The view was breathtaking, the sun beginning to set behind the distant peaks, casting a warm, golden light over the landscape. "Do you ever wonder what's next?" Olivia asked, sitting on a rock beside me. "Like what we're supposed to do with all of this?" I glanced at her, her eyes searching the horizon, a soft breeze lifting her hair. She wasn't talking about us specifically, but about life in general. And it struck me how similar our thoughts were, how we both stood at the crossroads of our pasts and our futures, uncertain but hopeful. "I think about it all the time," I replied, my voice calm. "I spent so much time focused on the mistakes I made, the pain I felt, that I never really allowed myself to think about what I wanted, what I could have. But now," I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. "Now I see that the future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we get to create. And I want to create something real. Something better." Olivia smiled, and in that moment, I knew she understood exactly what I meant. We were both ready to step into the future, but we weren't rushing. We were letting it unfold at its own pace, knowing that whatever came next, we could face it together. We stayed in the mountains for a few more days, talking about our dreams, our fears, and the things we still wanted to do with our lives. We weren't in a hurry to make any big decisions, but I realized I was beginning to see a future that included Olivia. One filled with shared adventures, laughter, and the kind of quiet, everyday moments that make life worthwhile. When we returned to the city, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep living in the shadows of my past. I was going to invest in my future, both for myself and for the people I cared about. I reached out to my old friends, the ones I had distanced myself from during the darkest days, and reconnected with them. I made time for family too, something I hadn't done nearly enough of in recent years. I even started working on projects that had always been on the back burner, things I had put off because I was too focused on the pain I had experienced. And through it all, Olivia was there, encouraging me, supporting me, but never pushing. I knew that the future wasn't guaranteed, but I also knew that I had the power to shape it, to make choices that reflected the person I had become. The person who no longer defined himself by his mistakes, but by his resilience and his capacity for growth. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when I would feel the weight of my past, when old doubts would creep in. But they no longer had control over me. I had learned to accept the messiness of life, to embrace it, and to use it as fuel for the future. The scars, the lessons, the heartbreak, they were all part of the journey. And they had shaped me into someone stronger, someone who could face the world with hope instead of fear. One evening, as Olivia and I sat on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights, I took her hand in mine and looked at her with a quiet certainty. "You know," I said softly, "I used to think that everything had to be perfect. That love had to be perfect, that life had to be perfect. But now I realize that perfection isn't the point. It's about finding someone who accepts you for who you are, someone who sees you even in your brokenness, and wants to build something together." Olivia turned to me, her eyes shining with a warmth that made my chest ache. "You're right. And I see you, Ethan. All of you. And I'm so glad you're part of my life." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude settle in my chest. We had both come so far, me from the wreckage of my past and her from the things she too had overcome. And together we were creating something beautiful. The future was still uncertain. But for the first time I wasn't afraid. I knew that whatever came next, I had the strength to face it. Because I had learned the most important lesson of all. No matter how many times life knocked me down, I could always get back up. And with Olivia by my side, I was ready for whatever came next. I leaned in and kissed her, the warmth of her lips against mine a reminder that, despite everything, there was beauty in the messiness of life. There was always something worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I wasn't alone.